Hi, this is Sara Hall, and you're listening to the Physical Performance Show.
Failure is not an option.
I've had my ups and my downs.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go. Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, brought to you by Physiocrem and Pogo Physio. I'm Brad Beer, sports physiotherapist and exercise scientist by trade and training, and founder of Pogo Physio. Each week, we'll aim to bring you the latest and greatest information and inspiration designed to help you perform at your own physical best. We do this across a range of different episodes, including interest editions, coaches' corners, featured performers, and expert editions. And on this week's episode 191, we jump over to a featured performer episode featuring American distance running star Sara Hall. Now, if the name's familiar, then you are spot on. Sara is the wife of prior featured performer of the show, American US marathon record holder Ryan Hall, featuring on episode 160. But it's Sara's time to shine on this week's episode as she shares around her highs, lows, and career learnings to date. And on the learnings, there is plenty to take away from Sara's sharings. By way of bio, in 2019 at the Berlin Marathon, Sara clocked a personal best of 2:22.16 in the marathon, making Sara the sixth fastest American in history. Sara has had a long and illustrious career, including time spent on the track with 1,500 metre and 3,000 metre running, through to road racing with multiple wins, including the 2017 and 2018 of the Gold Coast Marathon's half marathon race, clocking a 1:09.27 in 2018 to set the current course record. Sara has also been a team member for USA for the World Cross Country Championships in 2006 and 2015, and was the 2012 American Cross Country Champion, edging out Molly Huddle on the line. And in today's conversation, Sara outlines her 3 top tips for marathoners. Sara shares around how to minimize risks leading into a marathon with regards to injury, and why, on the topic of injuries, breakthrough can be on the other side of frustration. The concept of needing to absorb your training comes up on multiple occasions, as does the concept that has really been a trademark of Sara's pursuit of her running best over the years, and that is the need to persevere. We touch on overcoming the fear of failure, juggling being a mum of 4 beautiful grown girls, the power of documenting goals visibly, including a great story about Sara documenting her 2:22 PB in advance on her mirror, and Sara shares around racing fearlessly. This is a conversation that I know you are going to enjoy. Here is Sara Hall, US distance running star, as she looks to the 2020 US Marathon Road Trials in Atlanta, sharing around her career highs, lows, and learnings. Sara Hall, this is a real treat. We have been looking to line this up for some time, and 2019 has been a real roller coaster for yourself. Some incredible performances, some tough stuff for you to work through in terms of performances. But wow, what a way to finish the year in Berlin. Technically, we'll talk about New York today, but a 2:22.16 PB for 5th place. So welcome to the show, and congratulations on that massive PB.
Thanks so much for having me, Brad, and thanks.
Sara, we caught up with Ryan earlier this year on the show, and I asked Ryan what it was like coaching his wife, and Ryan mentioned that the beauty is when it goes right, it goes beautifully well, but when it goes wrong, in his words, he feels really bummed out. And he even mentioned that he felt like he needed to apologise after Boston. So maybe let's start with the highs of this year. What have they looked like for you?
Oh, well, definitely one of the major ones was just getting to run that big PR in Berlin that I felt capable of. But just, it had been 2 years since I made it to the start of a marathon without like a major injury in the buildup. So I'd kind of seen progress behind the scenes in training, but just hadn't been able to have that translate to a race yet. So I was really excited to be lining up in Berlin, feeling good and just feeling like this was going to be the moment, and it turned out to be. So I feel really thankful.
And leading into Berlin, did you have a sense that it was going to be a special day?
Well, I've been feeling really good in training, and just it had been really consistent. I had really few bad workouts, and just I felt like I was absorbing the training really well. So I think that was a really good sign, because I've done similar like volume of mileage and intensity and everything in other buildups, but I felt like this was the one where my body really like absorbed the work the best. So I took that as a really good sign, and most of my kind of races building up had gone really well also, even though those were on tired legs. So yeah, I felt pretty confident.
And you mentioned that word absorb in the training. I heard a beautiful quote recently, and that is, the only training we're benefiting from is the training we're recovering from. So what do you think it was about the Berlin preparation, Sarah, that had you absorbing that workload, which, as you say, you'd done before for preparations, so well this time?
That's a good question. It's hard to pinpoint. There's so many factors involved. I think one of them could have been I had the longest season of injury I've ever had. The end of fall into the winter of this year. And so I think, although that took a while to kind of come back from, I think the upside was it left me really refreshed and hungry and enjoying training. And so yeah, hopefully that's encouraging to people out there that are experiencing setbacks themselves, that, your breakthrough could be just on the other side of those setbacks if you kind of persevere and keep the faith.
And the persevering, Sarah, I mean, that's a hallmark of your career. And I think when people, the running world, watched and observed your performance in Berlin, it was a real celebration. I saw many, very well credentialed running commentators, names in the sport, celebrating the run as this is a run that signifies what it means to persevere through a career and work towards your best. There were plaudits coming your way left, right and centre, so it must have been really gratifying.
Oh, yeah, it's always special to kind of celebrate it with people. I think people have seen my journey, and, I've kind of towed the line through, like, times where I was ready, times I wasn't ready, and, so it's like you definitely get knocked down some of those times, but I think people, just kind of saw it coming in my races leading up to it. And it was special to share it with the running community for sure.
Sarah, you mentioned it had been the first time in Berlin you were able to take to a marathon start line, and you'd been trying for 2 years, that is. What were, what's some of the injury history you've had in recent years?
Some of them were kind of some bad luck, like, a couple 2018 Boston Marathon buildup was my first one, and I tripped on a run because it was snowing like crazy in Mammoth Lakes where I was training. So I was kind of doing this rocky road that I wouldn't normally run on, but took a pretty bad fall and really wrenched my SI joint pretty good. And that one took a while, but I was able to kind of, through some cross training and stuff, piece together a race in Ottawa, which was my PR prior to Berlin. And then the injuries I experienced kind of the following fall were definitely more of the overuse. I'd been kind of really pushing the envelope in training and wanting to find my lines, because I hadn't had that many like overuse injuries. So I kind of wanted to see like what my body was capable of. And you can't really do that unless you kind of cross over that line, really. So I definitely did that. And it led to a pretty long peroneal tendon injury that just kind of popped up right before the Frankfurt Marathon in 2018. And I had to drop out of that race because it just became so painful. And then running through it as long as I did in that race, unfortunately, really messed it up. And then when I got back into running, led to like another compensatory injury in my sacrum. So that really kind of took away my Boston buildup this last spring. So yeah, it's been a long season of kind of rebounding from those things, but also learning a lot from it. And going into Berlin, I was like, more than anything, I want to make it to the start line healthy. So how can we minimize some risk? I already kind of took those risks intentionally before, but this one, I'm going to minimize them a little bit to make it there.
Okay, that's so rich and deep. So you went from an SIJ injury from a fall, these things happen, through to some overuse stuff with the perineal tendons, and then the sister in arms, if you like, of tendon injuries, bone injuries, runners, bones and tendons. Sarah, you mentioned you minimise the risks leading into Berlin 2019. Just practically, what things did you do to help minimise some of the risks of an overuse injury?
Yeah, I still trained aggressively, but I would say there were just times where maybe we took an extra recovery day in between that normally I would just want to take one recovery day. And we would be like, oh, let's just, that was pretty hard effort. Like, let's just give it another day. That wasn't all the time. That was just kind of selectively. But yeah. And then I think kind of looking at some of the ancillary stuff and just the timing of it. So the peroneal tendon actually happened when I did a long run and then went straight into my weight routine just because I was trying to like bust it out. It was Ryan's birthday and I had all these plans and I was kind of just trying to like bust it out. But now I was a little more cautious of like when I do things, like trying to set myself up well so that, my body's going to like absorb it the best it can.
Yeah, there's that word again, absorb. Do you think as a young Sara Hall starting out in the sport, not saying you're old, Sarah, I should correct that there. But I mean, as a beginner runner, did you appreciate that word absorb?
Not really. I think kind of my strength as a runner is that I've been pretty naturally durable in my career. So I was able to get away with a lot for a long time. Like in high school, when I first kind of was training seriously, I used to like race every Saturday, like do a 2-hour and 15-minute long run Sunday, and then do like intervals Monday with my team. And it's like something I would never recommend to anyone now, but I didn't really think about it at the time. And so I think that that kind of just set the pattern in my mind of like just kind of expecting my body to handle whatever I throw at it. And I think that worked to a certain extent when I was running less and racing on the track. But once you start running over 130 miles a week in the marathon, I feel like you have a little bit of a shorter leash. You have to be more careful because that's a lot of pounding kind of day in, day out. So that's why I've tried to get smarter in these later years.
Wisdom is acquired, isn't it? You've just got to acquire it as we go, hopefully on reflection. But did you ever doubt, Sarah, that, through these back-to-back injuries, the frustrations that go with that, the psychological burden it is, did you ever doubt that you still had your best running in front of you, or you knew that was there to get, i.e. this massive PB in the marathon in Berlin?
There are definitely periods in my career earlier, like a decade ago when I was on the track, that I really had doubts if I had what it took to like do this at the professional level. I was definitely underperforming on the track compared to what I'd run in college. And that was hard. Like I felt like I was letting a lot of people down, like my coaches and sponsors. You're getting paid to perform. And as much as I was trying to get my body to perform, it wasn't. And that was really stressful. So during that time, I would say yes. But, God really met me in that time. And he really used a lot of that failure to kind of get to the root of some things in my life where I was fearing failure, because really I was putting a lot of my self-worth into my running performances. So it was actually a good thing, because going through that really freed me up from that fear of failure. And I think like that's really something that holds athletes back, is probably the biggest killer of performance. And when you get free of it, you're able to like really take risks and go after things. And you're just able to toe the line a lot freer and able to have, I think, better performances. So yeah, fast forward to now, even with these setbacks, I didn't really doubt that big PR was in there. I knew it was kind of just, I kept seeing my training progress in the next build up, even after injury and stuff. So I just knew it just took the right day, getting some decent conditions and making it healthy.
And persevering.
Yeah.
As you said at the start.
A lot of that.
Gosh, Sarah, you mentioned your weight routine. Your weight, routine earlier there is one of the things that you've learned around how to schedule it, etc. over the years. So what does Sara Hall's resistance routine look like in a build up to a marathon or a major meet or outing?
Yeah, I really rely heavily on my my physio, actually, whose name is John Ball. He's down in Chandler, Arizona, and I've been working with him for over a decade. And I think he just knows my body better than anyone after all that time. So he really kind of fine tunes things to like what my weaknesses are. So a lot of it is corrective exercises that aren't really like Olympic lifts and stuff. But then I do some kind of traditional squats and deadlifts and things because, yeah, I think that stuff is actually pretty important for the marathon with just needing your quads to be strong to handle the pounding.
Yeah, absolutely. And well done to you and your team, John. And obviously living with Ryan Hall, your husband, your esteemed husband, there's no shortage to access to resistance gear these days.
Yeah, we have a pretty well-equipped home gym, thanks to Ryan. So I don't really have to venture out too far.
Brilliant. And, I smiled and I thought it was brilliant when I saw one of your recent posts over on Instagram where Ryan had joined in some of the workouts. And I think you commented that he was pushing it on the efforts, but you were giving it to him in the warm down or the recovery. So he's putting the shoes on a little bit more, is he?
He is. With Ryan, he's kind of like a pendulum. It's like swings to the extremes. So like he's had periods of running since retiring, but usually the pendulum has been like in the extreme of not doing a lot and mostly trying to get really large and strong. But that it's recently swung back, and he's actually making quite a bit of improvement. Like today he did like 8 by a mile, like in low 5 minutes up at altitude on like a rocky trail. So I'm pretty sure I couldn't have done that, like even in my peak fitness. So yeah, he's made a pretty massive, it was actually when we were in St. Moritz, Switzerland before Berlin, that he kind of got re-inspired, and he was like, here we are in one of our favorite places to run together, and I'm off to the gym, why am I doing that? Like I could be like out on these beautiful trails with you. And so I'm forever grateful to St. Moritz for that.
So inside scoop, could we see a comeback looming?
I don't think so. It's funny. Our girls always, they're always like, you can do it, Dad. Like you can race again and stuff. And Ryan's like, stop. But so yeah, I think he's probably past that, but I'm definitely looking forward to running with him in workouts. We haven't done that since he retired. So
brilliant. And like yourself, form can come and go, but true gifting, true class, it's always there. It just gets expressed at different times through a running life cycle. Sarah, you mentioned there fearing failure, and I mean, any athlete, whether it's recreationally competitive, elite, such as yourself, I mean, it's a hard thing to not fear. But as you say, when your self-worth is tied up with your performance, it's difficult to not fear that failure. So, like practically, what advice would you share, Sarah, to the runner of any level out there around how they can extract themselves from their performance in terms of self-worth?
It's natural as an athlete, like you care about your performances a lot. So it's not like kind of a lack of caring or kind of because I obviously really, really want to do well anytime I toe the line, and I want it to be an expression of like who I am and stuff. But I think it's really about, not having your identity so tied in that it's like, if you fail, then you're a failure. Like running is something you do, and like you have good days and bad days, but at the end of the day, like it doesn't define you as a person and your self-worth. And for me, that took finding my identity apart from running, which I really look to my faith and like what God says about me and like in the Bible, but also like personally, like what he spoke to me about how he created me, and running is a part of that. It's a gift he wants me to enjoy and something he made me good at, but it's just a part of that. And I think a lot of it too is if I were honest with myself, a lot of the fear of failure came from like looking to other people for affirmation, like if I race well, then you get the praise and applause and you feel good about yourself and but instead like looking to God for that affirmation and being like, I am 100% approved and loved no matter what. And there's people that my family and people close to me that love me no matter what. And that's kind of what's important. And I don't need to be trying to look to other people for that affirmation. So kind of both of those areas are really what's kind of freed me up to just when I step on the line, it's like, I can do really unconventional things. I can do back-to-back marathons, or I can, I can train with reckless abandon or different things, like, because at the end of the day, like the performances are like a fun part of my life, but not like a do or die kind of, nothing's like riding on it really at the end of the day.
Yes, such rich perspective, Sarah. And I imagine yourself and Ryan are imparting some of this learning, this wisdom, these learnings, I should say, over to your beautiful girls, of which Hannah and Mia, I believe, are quite the little cross-country runners at the moment.
Yeah, it's been fun to share running with the kids, both because, I can actually, the older girls are fast enough to actually run with me, like my easy run pace, but also just because it's just added a new layer of depth of meaning to my running, just getting to model to them in real time, like a lot of the qualities that we've all found running to instill in our lives, whether it's perseverance or like getting back up after disappointment and taking risks, not being afraid of failure, all of that stuff. I'm kind of inviting them into my career process, and they're getting to see me model these things in real time, which has been really valuable. It's made me, it's hard doing this as a mom of four. Like it's really busy and I can't really do it in the same way I used to, which is definitely really hard at times. But I guess the upside would be like, I do see how impactful it is. And it's really made it, if I'm gone for a weekend once in a while or something, like I don't really have as much of that like mom guilt, because I actually feel like my kids, it's like so much better for them to see me doing something that makes me come alive and really getting to like just have something that I love so much. And even though like it's hard and it's like, it's hard work and it's hard emotionally at times, but how it's all worth it, I'm getting to show that to them, because that's what I hope for them as well.
Yeah. Wow. That modeling of, as you say, a parent that's alive, that's engaged, that's, happy within themselves. And gosh, every parent feels it, guilt. But to keep that perspective that, that it's actually a positive influence. You mentioned that, you can't do it like you used to. Is that just the time constraints that come with parenting, Sarah?
Yeah, I would say partly the time component, just because even though my kids are in school, it's like, there's just stuff you have to do all day long for kids, like my oldest is being recruited. Actually, she gets to announce tomorrow where she's headed to college.
Wow.
And that's been a whole part-time job, the whole recruiting process. And, you're always advocating for them at school, especially my kids that were behind since they hadn't been to school prior to coming to the U.S. They were adopted from Ethiopia, for those that don't know our story. And they were older. They were 5 to 15 years old when we adopted them 4 years ago. So yeah, there's just a lot. And then plus it's just kind of your mind space. Like you're always kind of like, you can't quite be as singular focused, because you have these people that you've been entrusted with, and you're kind of always figuring out like how to make them thrive and stuff. And so, before Ryan and I used to bounce around a lot more. We used to do sea level training camps, altitude training camps, kind of all that stuff. That all looks really different when you have a family. But yeah, I would say I've just tried to focus on the fact that I've been able to improve every year since being a mom. And so even when I have those kind of overwhelmed moments, I just go back to that.
Perhaps some athletes do their best when their singular focus is slightly shifted to be, as you say, responsible and entrusted with others, such as your kids. It's such a great example. And Sarah, let's not forget that your beautiful girls they were given the option to join Team Hall, so they knew what they were signing up for, I guess, at that point. We're all in. I recall Ryan sharing that story. What was your take on that special moment when you asked the girls, you invited them to come with you to the US?
Yeah, it was really neat to get to, well, first for our kids to get to know us prior to asking them. A lot of times with adoption, the child being adopted just has no control or say over the situation. And it's starting from trauma. There's something that's happened that they're not with their biological parents for whatever reason, various reasons. So yeah, it was really neat for them to get to know us. And then even before we ask them, have them say to some of their friends, like, oh, wouldn't it be amazing if those were my parents, And so that was cool, because just as we were kind of hoping to see what we were getting ourselves into by getting to know them in those early days, like they got to see us too. And so, yeah, just asking them and just seeing the excitement and relief was just, even though I was pretty nervous, I guess, to take the plunge, like not really knowing what we were getting into, like that really helped to see, like, no, this is meeting a need that, like, this is going to be like my legacy, no matter what I do in running, like this is really like what my legacy is.
And the girls were there with you recently and Ryan in New York, and you mentioned through your career you've had to learn how to get back up after disappointment. You went into New York 2019, coming off the high of Berlin, as you say, running the fastest you've run in a marathon. And then take us through the weekend. It didn't quite go to plan.
Yeah, I was pretty excited about New York just because, I raced the week after Berlin in a 10-mile race and felt really good there, was able to win. And it was a pretty hilly course, kind of similar to New York. So that really gave me the confidence that I had recovered enough to perform well. But yeah, unfortunately, I had some stomach illness. I'm not sure if it was like food or just like a bug that I caught, but it started at exactly kind of the wrong window of time, like midday, the day before the race. And so I'm kind of an eternal optimist when it comes to racing. And it's kind of like when I towed the line at Boston after only running 6 weeks, and I actually was like, thought I could win the race, You look back and you're like, yeah, that was kind of unrealistic. But like, I think for me too, like with New York, like, I'm like, oh, I'll be fine. Like, I'm still eating and I felt okay warming up. And so I was pretty optimistic, but it was pretty clear pretty early on that I didn't have my normal strength. I felt kind of wobbly and weak out there, and it just my stomach just got worse as the race went on. So I had to make the hard decision to drop out around mile 18, which, I've only dropped out of 3 races in my career, and I really, really don't like to if I physically am able to finish. Which wasn't the case in the other 2. But this race, I probably could have finished, but with the Olympic trials just 4 months away, I just wasn't sure that was the right decision to really dig myself in a hole physically as it likely would have. So I think it was the right choice in hindsight.
And I mean, I learned something from, I should say, your husband Ryan around, I heard him share that, there's this nobility to finish if you physically can. But when it comes to, the elite level performance, in his words, you just don't know how many matches you've still got to burn. So there can be a real wisdom and a discipline in taking the steps you took in New York.
There is, yeah. I'm trying to keep an open mind more towards what Ryan said, because, yeah, when you really go to the well, like when a marathon is going bad, and then you just gut it out through like those really hard parts, like you're really digging yourself deep. And like I did in Boston, that took me a while to feel good again. Whereas if you can kind of regroup, and then you might have another race in you, even a marathon, So yeah, I'm trying to change my thinking on that.
Yeah, and Ryan challenged me, and I think about it differently now, and I think it's a healthy perspective to have. Sarah, you mentioned the Olympic trials. They are coming up February 2020 in Atlanta, and you recently posted that you weren't planning to do much racing ahead of then. So, in rough terms, what will the preparation look like leading into Atlanta? Yeah,
so I didn't feel like I needed a physical break after I got over my sickness, but I wanted to give my body a chance to recover anyways. So because of that, as much as I love to race, I just don't think I'll be towing the line except for maybe once before Atlanta, and that isn't determined quite yet. But really, it's going to be just trying to get as strong as I've ever been, because that course is the hardest marathon course I've ever seen. So I've kind of already, ever since I saw it in May, I feel like been preparing, even though Berlin is pancake flat, like I've been kind of like, I want to take steps towards that now. And so just kind of continuing that process over the next 4 months.
And hilly course, so how many meters of elevation are on that course, just out of pure interest?
Yeah, well, I don't know meters that well. It's like around 1,400 feet. So maybe 3,000 or 300, 430 or so meters elevation.
I'm glad you're doing the conversion and not me. I'm sorry, it was an unfair question. Sarah, I really enjoyed the mirror shot that you had up. I'm referring to your gallery here of your mirror with your goals written on it, and it's just beautiful to look back and see this. You captioned it. In the midst of injury last fall, I wrote on my goals for the year on my mirror. I wrote my goals on the mirror, for the year, something that your girls noticed. And then you commented, hope it's a visual that sticks with them, of setting a vision for yourself, and even in dark times, keeping the faith and staying accountable to them. And one of the really incredible things is, on that mirror, you had Berlin 2:22. You then went and ran 2:22.16, which, how many minutes of a PB was that? And can you link that to the power of, documenting something, writing it down, making it visual?
4 minute and 4 second, I think, personal best. But it was pretty neat. That was kind of the time that I felt like was the next logical step from where I was prior to the injury. And I've kind of seen in my career how like it's kind of about a minute per buildup I'm able to chip away at. And so, but I've definitely seen in my career that, all the way back to high school, like my senior year of high school, I had been like third at the national championships, and this was my last chance to win the high school national title. But I started the year kind of in the worst shape of my life. And I put up my goals in a visible spot like that. And I just visualized winning the race like every day on this grass strip, because it was a grass course. And it was like, I lost almost every race leading up to the national championships. But that race, I ended up winning, and in a sprint finish, kind of like I had been practicing, like rehearsing in my mind. And it was almost like my body just knew what to do. And I think it is so powerful, just being able to visualize. And I really like to do it in training, just be able to visualize the upcoming race, so that once you're out there in the race, it's like you've been there before, and it's kind of, you're just going off of like muscle memory more than, trying to like make something happen that day. So definitely, I'm not someone that can just like lay there and picture a whole marathon in my, as laying in bed or something. But for me, I found in training is a good way to visualize. Yeah.
And so you might be, out doing a workout or a session, and you just start role playing, if you like, or rolling that footage in your mind of the event, the finish line, or what it's like if it gets tough. Is that what you mean?
Exactly. Yeah. Especially the tough moments, kind of how you're going to respond, like, in those moments. And what are the kind of the self-talk and the mantras that are going to get you through that tough part, practicing that in workouts.
So I assume that with your success on the Gold Coast, which is where I got to meet yourself and Ryan in person this year, you've been very successful on the Gold Coast. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is it more than 2 titles in the half marathon, or back-to-back in 2017 and 2018 with a PB in 2018 at that time?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, but I think it's either 2 or 3 wins. I've been there 4 times.
Yeah.
So I guess 2 then. Yeah.
No, I'm pretty sure it was 3. I'm sure it was 3. We'll look at the record books, but either way, you've been absolutely prolific and such a loved figure to have at the Gold Coast Marathon. So I imagine you've visualised that blue carpet coming around behind the picturesque pool then, taking the tape.
Yes. I love that race so much. I feel so honored that they keep having me back, because it's just one of those ones I look forward to so much. Like, there's races you do that you hope go well, but that one, like, I feel like I just come alive in that atmosphere. So So yeah, and I just love being in Australia in general.
Well, Australia loves having you down, so we're hoping to see a lot more of Sara Hall and Ryan along as well, who shared the funny story that he likes to get the little city council bikes wherever he goes and try and ride it on the course versus stay at the finish line. So we'll keep an eye out for Ryan pedaling away on those funny city bikes.
Yeah, or hopefully he'll actually be out there in the race one of the years soon.
You're listening to Sara Hall, US distance running star, on this, a featured performer episode of the Physical Performance Show, sharing on her career, highs, lows, and learn-ins. Today's episode is brought to you by PhysioCreme. PhysioCreme is a topical massage cream containing natural plant-based ingredients, ideal for the temporary relief of muscular aches and pains. If you're conscious of what you put on your body, you'll be happy to know that PhysioCreme does not contain parabens or hydroxybenzoates, and its non-greasy formula doesn't leave any sticky residue behind. PhysioCreme can be found Australia-wide at your local Coles, chemist or health store, as well as via their online shop. They've offered listeners of the show 20% off all products over on their online store, found at physiocreme.com.au. That's physiocrem.com.au. Hurting sucks, and PhysioCreme have got your back. Today's episode is also brought to you by Pogo Physio. We exist to help you get back to your physical best following injury. Our philosophy is simple. We do not want to see you for a session more than what you require. We just want to see that you get back to your best and back enjoying the things that you love. We want everyone to complete their rehabilitation and cross their physio finish line. To find out more about Pogo Physio's award-winning services, including our 1-hour initial appointments or our popular online physiotherapy services, jump over to pogophysio.com.au. For now, let's jump back with Sara Hall on her career highs, lows, and learn-ins. Sara, let's do a performance round. Are you ready for this? Some rapid-fire questions.
Sure.
Here we go. Training session most disliked.
Oh, an uphill tempo run at altitude from the climbs from 7,000 and 9,000 feet in 6 miles.
Training session most loved.
Probably my 15-mile tempo runs, ideally at sea level. They're a lot more fun.
Favorite pre-race meal?
I like rice and some kind of good fish, as long as it doesn't make you sick.
Yeah, nice. Your bedtime, your morning time?
It kind of varies, but typically around 9 and up around 6 to 7.
Depending on kids and everything else, right? Who's the athlete that Sara Hall most admires and why?
Oh, that's tough. But, I've always looked up to Kelly Clark. She's a half-pipe snowboarder that actually got to know in my church in Mammoth. And I've really just admired how she loves her competitors, and she really encourages them. She's prayed for their injuries, and God's healed them, and just seeing her really go after friendships with her competitors is inspiring.
Kelly Clark, yeah, wow. Toughest competitor you've ever raced, Sara? Who's that and why?
Ooh, that's a good question. Molly Huddle's always a tough one. We've had a lot of battles ever since the college days, so I'll go with that.
Go with Molly. Is there a mantra, Sara, that you use when you're racing or competing?
Yeah, I like to tell myself the well is deep. So it's like you can keep going to the well and drawing from it. Like you have a deep kind of reservoir of strength that even when you're hurting, like you can keep hurting and keep going to that strength.
The well is deep. Sara, your best recovery tip?
Eating a good amount of protein, like especially stretched out in snacks and stuff throughout the day.
One word to describe your racing style?
Probably fearless.
Oh, I like that. Sara, how would you describe being in the zone?
Yeah, for me, it's just really loving like the act of running, and like you're not even like you're feeling the pain, but it's like it's not affecting you because you're just enjoying. Like it's kind of, there's this Roger Bannister quote, in the joy of going all out, I forgot my pain. And I feel like that really sums it up, how that feels.
Oh gosh, you're just throwing these out here, Sarah. In the joy of going in the pain. What was it again? In the pain of go. Can you say it one more time?
In the joy of going all out, I forgot my pain.
Oh gosh, how powerful! And when was the last time Sara Hall was in that zone?
I would say probably, well, a lot of my workouts before New York, but definitely the 10-mile championships too. I wasn't quite in that zone because of my stomach in New York.
So yeah. you forgot your pain in the 10-mile champs.
Yeah.
Sarah, last question in the performance round. What's the most intense, the hardest session you can recall thus far in your career?
Ooh, good question. I think probably that uphill tempo run I was talking about. Pretty much every time I do it, it feels like way harder than Berlin was.
Oh, wow.
And I question why I do it. Yeah.
And you've taken this up mile tempo run with you from Redding to Arizona, right? You've duplicated in another state.
Yeah. So this one, we used to do them in Mammoth Lakes when we trained there, and then now that I do it at Flagstaff, it's way harder at altitude, as hills always are.
Well, it's a bit of a running hub. I believe Bernard Legat shares that state with you somewhere, doesn't he?
Yes, he's mainly in the low desert areas of Tucson, but he does come up here for some training stints, especially when it's really hot.
So
yeah, it was fun to watch him on the Gold Coast.
Yeah, wasn't it great? So he's taking it easy. So Bernard, if you're listening, you need to get up to altitude.
Yeah, exactly.
Sarah, let's 3 tips for marathoners from Sara Hall. So, what would be, let's put it for the recreational runner looking to perform or pursue their own physical best performance. What would Sara Hall's top 3 marathon tips be?
Yeah, well, the best advice I've gotten was from Ryan, which is run the mile you're in. So it's daunting with the marathon, just how many miles stretch out in front of you when you're at mile 3 or 4, and you can't think about that. You kind of have to just be present with the mile and know that you're going to have the strength for the future miles. And it's also the title of his book, Run the Mile You're In. But besides that, another would be finding your race pace. For me has been first having to have my legs be tired and then kind of doing marathon specific training. So before I used to be able to run these long marathon workouts and I wouldn't actually be able to translate that pace to the marathon because I was pretty fresh coming into them. But I found more, it takes like being tired, kind of like you are in the second half of the marathon, to really be able to use that as an indicator of what pace to run.
So find your race pace. Yep.
Yeah. And then lastly, I guess would be to take in fluids before you feel like you need it. So I'm taking in bottles even at 3 miles, 6 miles, even though I'm not thirsty at all. But it's like that's banking the carbs and the fluid you need for later on.
So there's 3 great tips there. Run the mile you're in. And I do advocate listeners grabbing a copy of Sarah's husband's book, Run the Mile You're In. It's a terrific read. Secondly, find the pace, find your race pace. And third, preemptively take in those fluids. And importantly, as you mentioned, the carbohydrates through some ingestion there as well. What is your typical nutrition strategy, Sarah, for a marathon?
Yeah, I use Cytomax. So I've been using them actually since I started pro running, and as did Ryan, all of his marathons. So a lot of my go-to is just, if it's good enough for Ryan, it's good enough for me. Kind of takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. So that's worked for us. Yeah. And I use like a scoop in about 6 to 7 ounces of water every 3 miles.
Yeah. So, and I mean, it's worked beautifully. Look at Berlin and leave New York to the side, just with things out of your control there. You mentioned you learnt from Ryan one of those tips there, run the mile you're in. If you had to boil your greatest learning through, many years of marriage, but also, coming together early in your careers as college runners, what would be the biggest learning you've taken from watching Ryan's career, observing it?
Oh, I've learned so much, especially with the marathon. Like, I feel like most of what I know about the marathon is from watching his career and then also from him now as my coach. But yeah, a lot of that fearlessness came from him because I didn't used to race that way as much. Like I think, especially kind of as I talked about early in my career and in college, where I felt a little bit more like I was trying not to have a race go bad than I was trying to really knock it out of the park, And so that just puts you in this kind of conservative mindset from the beginning. But Ryan was never like that. His very first marathon, which usually your first marathon, people are trying just not to blow up. But Ryan was in the London Marathon, and he took the lead late in the race and over like Olympic champion and world record holder and all these people. He's like just leading in front of them, even though it was his first one. And so that a lot of times he blew up in that process even. But I think seeing that like that mentality, you might not hit it out of the park every time, but that's what's needed, because like it kind of prepares you. You get a little bit closer, and like, or sometimes you do have that day where you feel amazing, and then because you went for it, so you have to be pretty resilient though. And he was, and kind of learning how he really didn't read any media about himself. He really kind of, he really did a good job not really caring about other people's opinions and stuff. And that really helped him, I think, be resilient with those failures too.
Yeah, so much there. And I've heard you say, Sarah, and I've written it down in preparation as a great quote from you: we're distance runners, we know how to dig in and we know how to persevere.
Yeah, for sure. I think like there's kind of just this relentlessness, I think, that's been forged in my running career that I think translates to every other area of life, where it's like, you're never comfortable when you're a distance runner, and kind of just being okay with that, and like being able to just put your head down and grind it out, which is so valuable.
You're listening to Sara Hall, US distance running star, sharing on her career highs, lows, and learnings. If you missed last week's episode, it was an expert edition featuring recovery expert, Associate Professor Dr. Sara Hall. Shona is regarded as one of the world's most prolific figures in the world of athlete recovery, and oversaw the Australian Institute of Sports Recovery Centre and 3 Olympic campaigns across a 15-year career with the Australian Institute of Sport. Here's a little snippet of Shona sharing on all things athlete recovery, the ins and outs, and why sleep is just so important.
And I could bore your listeners for hours on how important sleep is. I just hope now that the message is out there that this is, the best thing that you can do for yourself psychologically, physically, even outside of sport now. We're seeing the relationship between mental health and sleep, relationship with cognitive performance, relationships to cardiovascular health, diabetes, you name it. And when you think about it, almost all biology runs on a circadian clock. So even our immune cells are influenced by our body clock.
If you missed Dr. Sara Hall, be sure to jump back and download and enjoy the full episode. It's full of actionable steps and practical insights that will help you ensure that your recovery is as good as it can be. Whilst there, peruse the archives for other expert editions, including Dr. Stephen Seiler, periodized training, and why the intensity distribution of your training really matters, on episode 172. For now, let's jump back with this week's featured performer, US distance running star Sara Hall, sharing on her career highs, lows, and learnings. Sarah, you also recently commented you still have so much to learn in the marathon. What learnings do you think you've got to take on before we see Sara Hall's best?
Yeah, I think just still working on race execution, just especially tactical races, kind of figuring out what moves are the right ones to cover, which ones aren't, really listening to your body, because I feel like in the marathon sometimes it's like you're fine until all of a sudden you're very not fine, So like learning how to listen to your body's cues earlier to really measure your effort out perfectly throughout the race. And as far as training, I think I'm still figuring out like what's the sweet spot with like being aggressive, but not stepping over that line where it leads to injury. And so still fine tuning that for sure.
Oh, I love that. I mean, here you are, you've had such a distinguished career, so versatile, from the track to 5,000 steeple, 5,000 meters, half fulls, 10,000, and you're still figuring it out. Isn't that just a great metaphor for life?
I really like, especially ASICS is a Japanese company, and they have this culture there of just like every day working on like personal improvement. It's not as much as winning focused as we are in the US. It's more about like personal excellence day in, day out, like moving the ball forward. And I really like that kind of mentality.
I mean, you've had a long relationship with excuse the Aussie accent, ASICS down here, but ASICS for yourself, the same company, over the years. And from an outsider looking in, Sarah, to me that speaks about, loyalty. And I certainly see that as one of the traits of both Ryan and your lives, and your life as well, Sarah. I mean, it's quite rare to see that partnership for that long in commercial sport. It can be.
Yeah, it really is. Going on 15 years now. And, I'm so incredibly thankful for their loyalty, because it was not because I was very consistent as an athlete. It was quite the opposite. But because of that, it's allowed me to kind of reach those breakthroughs like I've had recently and stay in the sport longer at a time where if I had been cut in when things were going poorly, I probably would have left the sport. And so it's really changed how I see business and what it means to believe in someone and kind of take that long-term approach and how beneficial that is. So yeah, I'm really grateful.
Yeah, that long-term approach. And it's so counter to, our throwaway culture, which is so quick to discard a coach that's not performing often, in terms of a football team, or rework the team's roster. Yet in something as pure and simple as running, there can be these great stories of, as you say, believing in people, sticking with people, taking the long-term play to watch them perform at their best. Sarah, if you had to boil everything you've learnt through your career down to one piece of advice to help the listener of this show perform at their best, what would Sara Hall's one piece of advice be?
I would say just figuring out like what makes you tick as a person, like what drives you, and kind of really leaning into that, figuring out what are the things that get in the way of that. But what makes you passionate about the sport? And for me, I feel like my approach can be really different from other people, but I've just become increasingly confident in knowing who I am and like knowing what makes me excited. It's led to like enjoying the sport more. It's led to performing better every year. Just not trying to compare myself to other people and do it the way they do it, but really kind of being you to the fullest.
Be you to the fullest. I like that. Gosh, Sarah, do you think though people can be themselves to their fullest at the start of their career, or do you think it's a matter of learning it as we go?
Yeah, I think it's both. But yeah, I think just the main thing is kind of, I guess, just not being afraid to try things early in your career, so that seeing failure and seeing things that don't work as just a learning experience to get you further along in knowing yourself as an athlete better.
Sarah, you mentioned one thing you're still learning about the marathon is measuring your effort, how to measure that out. Are you a data runner, or do you run by feel, heart rate? How do you sort of try and quantify your efforts and your workloads in training and racing?
Yeah, I would say it's a combination. So I use data like GPS and track my heart rate when I sleep or different things. But I'm not kind of a slave to it where I feel like I have to hit certain paces on easy runs or things. It's more like just getting the data and then like just seeing long-term trends or, so using it, having it serve you versus kind of being a slave to it.
Sarah, finally, you are going to issue listeners with a physical challenge. Every featured guest does. What would Sara Hall's physical challenge to the listeners of this show be for the week? It can be entry level, it can be difficult, it can be challenging, it can be fun. So what is Sara Hall's physical challenge for the week?
Ooh, that's a good one. Well, one thing I like to do, you can't do it a lot, but especially before I do the Gold Coast half, I like to do a body guided tempo where I run half marathon gold pace as long as I can. And once I'm off, like for where it looks like I'm not going to be able to get back on, then I stop. And then you can even do like maybe some shorter periods of running at that same pace. Like if you feel good enough to, it's not like you're like needing to be scraped off the pavement or something, but you don't want to go quite that far. But yeah, that's always a fun
And
one.
you called it, just if I captured it right, a body guarded. Is that what you called it? Sorry?
Yeah, body guided tempo.
Body guided, my correction. And do you do that typically? I know the Halls like to visit the Coombaba Forest Reserve with the kangaroos when you're in town. Where do you normally do that body guided tempo pre the Gold Coast Airport or Gold Coast Half Marathon?
Definitely a few weeks in advance of the race, like maybe ideally like 4 or 3 weeks out. You don't want to do it too close because it'll be pretty taxing.
Yeah, so it's a few weeks out, not on the doorstep of the event. Sarah,
Nope.
You afternoon time, your time there, and you have the girls home from school and lots to tend to. I just want to acknowledge and thank you for your time and your contribution, and also for the great role model that you are, have been, and continue to be for runners everywhere, as an example of the very theme of this show, which is just to keep pursuing your best performance. So thanks for your contribution and all the best leading into 2020.
Thanks for the great conversation and also for the great work when I was out on the Gold Coast. I hope to see you again this summer.
So there you have it, another episode of the Physical Performance Show, and I trust you enjoyed Sarah's sharings today. If you did, then please jump over and give Sarah a shout out on social. You'll find Sarah over on Instagram, Sara Hall, Hall 3, the numeric. And please let Sarah know what it was that you enjoyed from her sharings. Be sure to also tag the show in on your podsies. That's a screenshot of the episode that you're enjoying at any given moment. The show's handle at Physical Performance Show and my handle at Brad_beer on Instagram and Twitter. A massive thanks as always to the good folk who make this show possible week in and week out and ensure that the show goes live each and every Thursday evening. That's Daryl Misson, our audio engineer, Susan Wilkin on all things show administration, Matthew Walding on all things show graphic design, and Oliver Crossley helping behind the scenes. Another huge thank you to this week's show sponsor, PhysioCrem. PhysioCrem is the cream of choice at Pogo Physio, and it's a product that's a must in your toolkit. Don't forget to take advantage of the 20% offer from PhysioCrem over at their website, physiocrem.com.au, using the coupon code POGO, P-O-G-O. A huge thank you to those leaving ratings and reviews over on iTunes. If you have been enjoying the show, then please jump over and consider rating the show. It really does help with visibility and reachability and getting this show into the earbuds of more people just like yourself looking to perform at their own physical best. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you've been enjoying the show. That will ensure that this show lands in your earbuds each and every week. It is annual feedback time for the Physical Performance Show, and we would love to know what you think. It's simple. Jump over to pogophysio.com.au/podcast, jump to the bottom of the page and hit the big green button that simply says, let us know what you think of the show. There you'll find a brief survey and you can go into the draw to win a $50 Amazon gift card for leaving your feedback. The winner will be drawn on the final episode of 2019. So please jump over and provide that much needed feedback on how we can continue to make this show better. Coming up on next week's episode of the Physical Performance Show, we'll share with you a conversation that I recently had with US physical therapist and renowned biomechanist Jay Deshary. Jay is the author of 2 books, Running Rewired and Anatomy for Runners, and is the innovator of the recently released MOBO, M-O-B-O board, a novel approach designed to improve your foot control, which for athletes and runners really matters. Here's a little snippet of my conversation with Jay Deshary.
What type of training are you looking at with something like to improve proprioception and balance, right? You're not looking to develop muscle mass. What you're doing is to look at, changing that neuromuscular recruitment. And all the research in the world on motor learning, how we learn, shows that things done frequently in very small doses are the best way to learn that kind of micro control, right? So I have folks, spend 5 to 6 minutes, 2 to 3 days a week, right? This is not something you have to do every day. If you want to, great. We support that, right? I've never had athletes who are over prepared, but the idea is, less is more. but spread it out more throughout the week, right? So this can be part of your dynamic warm-up before a run. This can be part of your dynamic warm-up in the gym, right? So, whatever it's great if you need a mobo board, but if you don't, you need to give your feet attention.
So be sure to be tuning in next week for another expert edition, this time featuring Jada Sherry. Until then, keep pursuing your physical best performance. I'm Brad Beer, and this has been the Physical Performance Show.